being a cog in a machine employee, but then also being an artist cog is a difficult position to be in. You are 100% every single time going to have disagreements with what you think is good and what the people signing your checks think is good. They're the one giving you money to make their thing, so they want to see their thing, which makes sense. Limo driver, you can completely separate your identity from how you make a living. Your identity and your passion, your love, and your dreams are not tied up into how you are paying your bills. Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. I am Kevin Lieber, and you are stuck with me today. We're going to be talking about artist brain because I watched a fantastic video that I'll tell you all about. But first, let me just tell you that Matt is traveling right now. I was traveling kind of the past 2 weeks, which is why we have not recorded a podcast in a couple of weeks. But he'll be back, I think, next week. I don't really know. I don't even actually know exactly where he is, but he's somewhere and he's alive and well. I am back home and decided to hop on and talk to you today about a video that came up on my feed this morning. I woke up and it was just bam, right there from a channel I'd never heard of, a topic that I haven't clicked on videos related to. It was just one of those sort of, here you go, Kevin, why don't you watch this video? Because I think that it might be interesting to you. That was what the YouTube algorithm said to me. And I said, listen, YouTube algorithm, you're freaking me out, but you're actually right. I do want to watch this video. So I did. It is by a YouTuber named Kamikaze Shortbus. Kamikaze Shortbus, which is a very funny and interesting username. And the title of the video is, I tried to follow my passion for art, but now I'm 32 and unemployed. Okay. So that stood out to me immediately because it's a topic that I think is interesting as far as creatives trying to make a living off of their creativity, or, specifically artists trying to make a living off of their artistry. I want to talk about the word artist for a second because it's kind of a confusing word. I don't use the word artist to describe myself or a lot of other creatives because I think that there's kind of baggage attached to it, and it sort of makes you sound pretentious, which is not a fun thing. Nobody really wants to seem like they're being pretentious. I think for the most part, it's attributed to creatives who work in specific disciplines, and I think that gets a pass. So if you are an illustrator or a painter or a sculptor, kind of anything that can be displayed in a museum, maybe that's what it is. If you can display a creative work in a museum, although I guess musicians are considered artists. You can't exactly stick a musician in a museum. But YouTubers, I don't think people think of as artists, do they? I mean, there's so many different types of YouTubers. Maybe specific ones might stand out to you as being artists and other ones certainly not. And video games are another thing that there's like a long-standing debate over whether video games are art. I don't really understand how they're not. I'm not sure what the argument for them not being art exactly is. Maybe somebody in the comments who does not think that video games are art will explain to me why they believe so. But this is why the word artist is something I typically stay away from. However, in this case, I think it's completely accurate and apt. Kamikaze Shortbus went to art school. She is a 3D sculptor and has worked on major IPs that I think everybody knows, but she doesn't say in the video. And she says that's for legal reasons. I'm sure there's some NDA as part of her contract that she had to sign that prevents her from speaking about what studios she worked for and what projects she worked on. All of this is part of kind of the problem of this video. Not the problem of the video, but the problem that Kamikaze Shortbus has in general, being an artist and an employee at the same time. So being an employee, like a cog in a machine employee, but then also being an artist cog is a really, really difficult position to be in, especially depending on what type of artist you are. Like, I think there are probably, obviously there must be plenty of creative people who are happy to work as, or maybe not. Maybe every artist is upset to have a job in which they're creating art for somebody else, and they just kind of grin and bear it, not bin and grare it. Like, I think of Pierre Bernard, who was on Late Night with Conan O'Brien. Pierre Bernard had a really, really funny recurring sketch on that show about ranting from his like angry recliner about nerd stuff. Also, side note, Pierre Bernard is one of the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life. He literally, when I was an intern at Late Night with Conan O'Brien, you had to take a Polaroid of yourself that would then get hung on a wall with your name on it, so that the employees could reference the Polaroid wall to see what everybody's name was, because you get a new batch of 25 interns or whatever it is every season, so you don't have long enough to get to know anybody. Anyway, Pierre Bernard took a picture of the Polaroid wall and studied it. He studied it so that he memorized the names and faces of every single intern when I was there, which I imagine is something he did every single season. So this is the type of person Pierre Bernard is. The reason I bring him up is that he was a contracted full-time employee artist for that show. And, obviously he was doing art that was cool, whether it was portraits of Conan or different art for different sketches. That was, I'm sure, fun and whimsical. But regardless of that fact, he told me stories of him then going home after a full day of working as an employee artist, him going home and working on his own art. So even when he had a job as an artist, there was still that unquenchable desire within him to make the stuff that he wanted to make. Because here's the issue, like one of the major issues that Kamikaze Shortbus talks about in her video is that when you are being paid by somebody else to make art, you are not making your art. You are making their art. And you are 100% every single time going to have disagreements and issues with what you think is good and what the people signing your checks think is good. This is always going to happen. I mean, I have run into this in my own way with doing YouTube videos when it comes to dealing with brands. So as everybody who watches YouTube knows, one of the strongest revenue streams for YouTubers are doing, in video ads. And there are two major types. There are integrations where you're just pretty much reading a script that the brand wrote. So you're doing an ExpressVPN ad and they pretty much just hand you a list of talking points. So you say, well, ExpressVPN is the greatest way to watch sports when you're traveling, or, whatever it is. The other type, which pays much, much better, but is also way, way more work and often a worse product for the audience are dedicated videos where a brand will say, here is a huge pile of money. Now do an entire video about our product. Well, let me tell you, dear listener, that the marketing people involved in making the decisions about those videos give like horrible feedback, creative feedback on the product, on the product, meaning the video. It never goes well. Their notes are always really dumb, and you just have to learn to deal with it. You have to pick your battles. You fight back on some stuff. You cave on other things. But the point is, they're paying for a video. You're contracted to make it, and they really have the final say unless you really put your foot in the ground. At some point, they could just walk away and say, okay, well, we're not paying for this because this isn't what we want. And you go your separate ways if it gets that bad. But one of the weirdest things, about creativity is how intangible it is. It is a completely intangible skill and talent. So if I wanted to race Usain Bolt, I would know right away that I would lose. It is not intangible. Like athletic skills are very apparent. You can, if anybody heard that I was entering a dunk contest against LeBron James, literally nobody would bet on me to win. If, I don't know, I was entering some sort of creative contest, I don't know, a book writing competition, you couldn't, how would you even gauge that? You couldn't even gauge that on sales because LeBron James is going to sell way more books than I will for completely different reasons than however good the book is. And almost everyone thinks that, most people think that they are creative. They do not understand that there are levels. There are levels to this. There's capital C creative, which is something that's actually measurable. I've read studies on this. It's been a while since I read it, but one of the tests that they do has to do with, you have a certain amount of time to come up with as many ways to use a brick as you can. Something like this. They'll say you have a brick. You're sitting in a field and you have a brick. List the number of things that you can do with the brick and in 2 minutes or something like that. And a capital C creative person will come up with 35 things in that 2 minutes they could do with a brick that all make sense, that aren't just gibberish. And someone who isn't will come up with 3. So this is something that is measurable, but in everyday life, you're not taking these high C creative tests. And there's just this weird compulsion from people. I heard this story that made me laugh so hard. I was watching a interview with a stand-up comedian named Brian Regan. Now, if you don't know who Brian Regan is, he has been around forever. And to my understanding, is just one of the most well-respected stand-up comedians amongst stand-up comedians. In interviews that I've heard of people talking to and about Brian Regan, they all just gush about how good he is, how influential he has been, how influential he's been to much more famous comedians, which happens. Anyway, Brian Regan's telling a story about how he hates, and I've heard this also from a lot of comedians, they hate telling people when they ask what they do for a living that they're a comedian. It's just never a fun conversation. The reaction from somebody is either, tell me a joke, and it's ugh, no, this is not the time for that. Or in this instance, this story he was telling was sitting next to a guy on a plane. They were making small talk. He was avoiding telling him that he was a comedian, but eventually they got so far into a conversation that he kind of had no choice and didn't want to lie. Told him he was a comedian, and the guy goes, I could do that. Just some random guy. I don't know if he could have been, an architect or it's some sort of administrator or an accountant. Who knows? Who knows what this guy did for a living? But instantly to Brian Regan, one of the greatest stand-up comedians of all time. He says, I could do that. And people really, and I'm sure he believed it. And a lot of people really believe that. Like they see somebody doing something like stand-up comedy, which is impossible. It is so unbelievably hard to be funny on stage, by yourself with just you and a microphone in front of a crowd of drunk people. It is so unbelievably difficult that the best people in the world at doing it bomb. If you've ever listened to interviews with comedians, they talk about that. Like, it's not like they go out there and they kill every single time. And also sometimes when they get so famous, people just laugh at them because they like them so much. So there's that weird dynamic there as well. So they're not even really like laughing at the material. They're just laughing at Chappelle because they love Chappelle. And no matter what he says, they laugh at him. But anyway, that's an example of, for some reason, being like a highly skilled creative person is often seen as something anybody could do. I could do that. Oh yeah, I don't want to, or I don't have time, or I'm too busy, but like I could definitely do that. And I think because it's just this mysterious, often inexplicable thing that some people can do and some people just can't. But most people can't. A small number of people can do really well. And also because if you are a very good artist, you can see things that other people can't see, or else how could you be a good artist? Like, this is self-evident. It's self-evident that if you're excellent at almost any, at anything, this doesn't have to be with creative people. If you're like excellent at a thing and better than most people at that thing, then you are seeing the thing differently than other people, or else they would be just as good at it. Unless it's like, again, like an athletic thing, sports thing. Like I'm not going to be able to hit a home run better than Shohei Ohtani, even if I can see what it looks like to hit a home run. But I learned this when I went to school for computer science, and I was on a floor of engineers. Like, engineers see things with their engineer brain differently than an artist sees something with their artist brain. Anyway, this girl talked about how she did really poorly in school. She was basically like a straight C student, hated school. Multiple times in the video talks about wasting her time with classes that she wasn't interested in. And this is also something that I have witnessed. I was not that way. I did fine in school, but I knew a kid, the best artist that I knew in high school was horrendous as a student, to the point where one of the funniest things I ever saw in high school was this dude getting his math test. That the math teacher passed out the quiz to everybody in the class. He writes his name on the top of the quiz, immediately hands it back to him, and then takes a nap on his desk. Like, this dude could not do school, but he was an astonishing artist. He could draw anything, and it was absolutely incredible. I don't know what the correlation is, if there is one, between great artists and like horrible school performing. Maybe it has something to do with like a personality thing where, trait openness, which is part of the Big Five personality list, is highly correlated with creativity. And maybe they're just like, their brains are so far open and they are really low on trait conscientiousness. So like the rigidity and the structure of school just does not play well at all with their bursting with imagination, open artist brain. That's totally my guess on that. But I think it also parlays into being a cog in a corporate machine, also like not working well for a lot of these like artsy type people. And that is something that I 100% have experience with. It happened to me a few times. I mean, it happened to be in college. So I went to college for film, and I was a little argumentative with my professor on a number of occasions, and we had become, friends afterwards. But while I was in her class, I was kind of disagreeable, I think you would say. Disagreeable, and was vocal about it. I didn't shy away from pushing back against. And now I was stubborn and definitely a jerk and thought I knew everything, which I absolutely positively did not. And I was definitely wrong about a lot of the things that I said. But I do remember one conversation where I can't remember what the project was. We did so many projects, but I had I was pissed off with her feedback on a project that I did. And it had to do with this topic. It had to do with, like, I was supposed to follow the rules of the project and I didn't. I did what I thought was quote unquote better. I thought, I'll do it my way. This will be a better video, a better short film, whatever it was. And she did not like that. And she was right not to like that. Like, looking back on it now, like, I was being a self-righteous jerk about it. But what she said to me was that, you won't get to make your own decisions when you're making sneaker commercials. Okay. So her point was, if you go to school for film, then you eventually hope to get a job in the film industry. You're not the boss. Like, your artistic vision doesn't matter if the person who hired you wants to see something differently. It just doesn't. That's just how it is. They're the one paying for it. They're the one giving you money to make their thing. So they want to see their thing, which makes sense. But I instantly recoiled at even the idea that I would someday be making sneaker commercials. Like, that was something that I couldn't even fathom doing. Instantly, that was my reaction. It wasn't like something I thought about that night or something. Like, literally standing there face to face with her. And I didn't say this out loud, but in my brain, I was like, I will never do that. Like, I won't have that problem where Nike or whoever hates what I did and I have to do what they want, because I'm just not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to make sneaker commercials. So, that obviously was a problem for my filmmaking career, which didn't exist. I did not go get a job in the film industry because I was personally allergic to the idea of, being hired as, well, you have to start on the low man of the totem pole. So you start as like a PA, like a production assistant, maybe, or a gaffer or a best boy. I don't even really know, because I never entered that arena. Maybe you're lucky to get hired on as one of those things so that you could eventually potentially work your way up to assistant director or something. I don't know. I don't even know what the trajectory is because I didn't follow it. I did take, I took that job. I've talked about this on the podcast before, where I was an assistant to the assistant of the head of Sony BMG Film. And by lunchtime on the first day, I wanted to jump out the window. It was like the worst. It was like a prison to me to be chained behind that desk, answering phones and, organizing meetings. It's like, this is the worst thing in the world to me. What's funny about me mentioning that is that in Kamikaze Shortbus's video, she says very much the same thing, in the sense that she says she hates the idea, like it would kill her to work in an office surrounded by people just grinding away on her art, which is not her art. And that's kind of like the big picture part of this discussion, is that there's a huge difference between like having a day job, which could be anything. It could be being a bartender. It could be being an accountant. It could be working retail, be anything. And then having, your night free to work on whatever your art is, which, as I mentioned earlier, like Pierre Bernard from Conan, he did that anyway. He did both. He had a day job that was making art, and then he still went home and made what he wanted to make, right? So like this is a thing for artists who have a compulsion to create, which I also think is kind of a distinction that not a lot of people really recognize, is that there are types of people in this world who, unless they're making stuff, they feel like they're dying, basically, which is absolutely a problem that I have and have had most of or all of my adult life. I have had this problem where, like, unless I'm working on something, I have a really, really hard time feeling comfortable. What I feel like is that I'm wasting my time. And she talks about wasting the concept of wasting time. This is another little weird hypothesis that I have that could be completely wrong, but that I want to throw out there because it's something that I recognize in myself. And then I also recognized in her video that I watched this morning, is that I am like weirdly obsessed with how I'm spending my time. Like I wish for like this topic, I wish that Matt was here because he and I have talked about this. And I think that, perhaps sometimes that he's been annoyed by me and my obsession with time. But I've always felt that way. Like if I feel like I'm wasting my time on something, it is a horrible, 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 horrible feeling. It bothers me to such a degree. It throws me into a depression like that. That will make me depressed, is if I'm like trapped somewhere. I can't get out of that place and I'm just dying to get out of it. Can't wait to get out of it because it feels like a waste of time. And that is 100% how I felt when I had that assistant job. Like I recognized that immediately. I was like, wow, I am dying in this job and I have to get out of here immediately. So maybe I don't know if that's an artist thing. It might not be. I might just be connecting that dot because that's how I feel and that's how this girl feels. And maybe these are me and her are the only ones I've encountered that have talked about that. But that's definitely a thing. It's like I am hyper conscious of how much time I have on the earth. I want to utilize that time to make things. That's why the tagline of this podcast is make something mean something. Like that is meaningful to me, to create stuff and to share those experiences with other people. That makes me happy. That's been part of the struggle for me in working on Sleep Warrior, my book, is that I don't really have anyone to share that with. It's a very not lonely experience, but an isolated one for sure. Whereas what's great about YouTube is that you can work on a thing, even if it takes 6 weeks, you know that it's going to come out soon as it's done. And then, it's out there. Anyway, going back to working in a creative field. So that was something that I avoided completely, like straight out of the gate. I knew that I could not do that. And I personally was completely comfortable working in the restaurant industry and the bar industry, and then working on my creative projects in my spare time. That's what I did for several years, until eventually YouTube came around. And eventually after that, I started working with Michael on Vsauce. And then miraculously, I was able to make stuff for a living and just work all the time on creative stuff, but then also have that, pay my rent. But this scenario that Kamikaze Shortbus is talking about, where, you go to art school, you gain a skill, you become passionate and talented about it, but then the jobs that exist in that industry are soul crushing. That is a really tough position to be in. And I completely sympathize with it, because on one hand, you are doing the thing that you like to do, but on the other hand, you're doing it in a way that, I don't know, I guess you're just like constantly unhappy with. Like you're perpetually unhappy doing the thing that's supposed to make you happy. That's a really unique situation. I don't think that, like, if you are a limo driver or something, you don't encounter that. You go to work, you drive your limo, you get paid. There's no like love attached to that. There's no passion attached to that. You can completely separate your identity from how you make a living. Your identity and your passion, your love and your dreams are not tied up into how you are paying your bills. If they are, I mean, this is one of the reasons that I did not want to do Vsauce 3. So, Vsauce 3 was a video game. Jake changed it more into movies because he loves movies. He's way more of a movie guy than he is a video game guy. But when we launched Vsauce 3, it was supposed to be like video game science. And even though I am by far the biggest video game nerd out of the three of us, I did not want to do video game content because I like it so much. I did not want to tie something that I was, I know this is like the complete opposite of what most advice is, especially like YouTuber advice is like, you should be doing a thing that you're passionate about and you would do anyway. And for the most part, that is good advice. But for me, that was not good advice. I wanted to keep those separate. I wanted to have video games as an escape from work and not have it become work. I don't know if I imagine that their musicians are probably like this too. Like, they have like studio musicians, and like, I think there's a big difference between someone who wants to play their own music and then like the type of person who wants to be first chair clarinet in the Philadelphia Philharmonic or whatever. I think these are different type of people for a reason. But so Kamikaze Shortbus is making this video. She's 32. She burnt out completely, or just was ejected herself out of the industry that she supposedly thought, or she did think that would be her career that she would love. And I get it. I totally get it. So, what is the answer? There's a lot of things in her video, and I recommend that you watch it, and subscribe to her. She seems to have just kind of started doing YouTube, so she could use the likes and the subs. So check out Kamikaze Shortbus. And this is not a podcast for me to tell her what to do at all. But for me, what worked out was to just not even engage in trying to mix getting a job in a creative field where I couldn't control what I was creating. Like, maybe in a sense, I was lucky to have or maybe I'm just lucky to be comfortable with, or was comfortable with paying my bills with sort of any kind of job I could get. And I did a lot of different jobs. I worked at a theater for a little while, just doing grunt work and like overhire work, moving sets and painting sets and that sort of thing. I was a fry cook at a chicken wing place. I waited tables at a different place. I was a bartender at a different restaurant. I was a bar back at a gigantic club that had 7 bartenders and 2 floors. And I had no problem doing those jobs and then going home and working on my own projects. The only times that was kind of weird was that I was looked at as a total weirdo for doing that by my coworkers. And I've talked about this before too, that you do have to deal with that. You do have to deal with like the social pressures, and you have to be comfortable with that too. The social pressures of people around you kind of making fun of you for not being part of the clique, not being part of the group that, they decide to do a trip and we're all going tubing at the river tomorrow. Aren't you going to come? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that because I have projects that I want to work on. And if I went with you tubing on the river, I would be miserable the whole time because I would feel like I was wasting my time doing that rather than working on a potato cartoon. And I know that sounds psychotic, but I don't care. I don't care that that's insane and weird and strange to you, but it's how it is. That's how it is. That is what I want to do. I know that's what I want to do. I'm comfortable with what I want to do. You can do whatever you want, like have fun drinking your Coors Light on the river all day. Have a great time. That's not a great time to me. What is a great time to me instead is sitting in my apartment and writing a weird story that maybe 2 people will ever read. Like, I can't explain to you why that's better to me. I don't know. Like, I don't have any clue why I'm wired that way, but that is how it is. So this is why artists are weird. This is why they're outliers. And this is why you need artists to be weird and to go away and scurry into a corner alone and make something, write jokes, write songs, paint beautiful works of art, because most people are not going to do that. It's irrational. It doesn't make any sense. And one of the things Kamikaze Shortbus has talked about in this video is working on her own project. She's talked about learning Game Maker and learning how to do some simple coding and developing her own video game. And that to me sounds fantastic. I think that's a great idea, because people who have like that level of creativity disease really have to be working on a thing. They have to channel that energy into something, or else you really go crazy. And there are obviously plenty of people who, work for a video game company doing concept art or whatever it is. But I don't know if any of them are super happy with that. I wonder if the people who do well are kind of able to chug along with that job while also spending their nights and weekends working on what they want to do. She does talk a lot about, artists being mistreated in the industries that she was working in, being overworked and undervalued. And that, I think we've heard a lot about that. We've certainly heard a lot about that in Hollywood. There have been some pretty high profile instances of like VFX companies just working like absolute dogs and barely being paid anything. I thought there was a famous one where some VFX studio didn't even get paid at all. And then obviously we've also had like lots of layoffs in various major video game companies and studios. So that is definitely a thing. Now, that happens for like very normal business reasons. It's not always some sort of nefarious reason. Sometimes there's just, you have a bottom line that you have to hit because you don't want to go out of business and you have to make layoffs for the business to survive. That's a thing that happens. But I also do think that it happens where, like I was saying earlier, that creative people are just undervalued. Like they're not seen, like the people, the managers, the chief financial officers type people, they are not creative. They don't understand what creative people do. Like sometimes the contributions that they make are just so ephemeral. Like they're so hard to see and to quantify that you think that, well, anybody can do that. We're paying this person 70 grand to make stuff. Well, we can just hire somebody to make this stuff for 40 grand, right? What's the difference? Because they can't see the difference. It's just not as readily apparent, I think, to these people because they don't have access. They don't have a trained eye for it. And then even if they, hire the lesser person, the cheaper person, and the output is worse, then I don't know always that they would blame it on that. They could probably excuse it off as changing market conditions or like some other reason that the thing didn't work anymore. I mean, you see this in Hollywood all the time when, someone who is the creative visionary, like the guy from Pixar leaves or whatever, and then the movies suck after that. You're like, well, why? Why do they suck? Because like that person was really important to making all of the little decisions that add up to being big decisions, or making like little tiny differences and decisions that add up to making a huge difference to the end product. I mean, Steve Jobs is a really good example of this, where, Apple, Steve Jobs was there, was doing well. He left. They started floundering. They bring him back. Then they completely start crushing it. Then he gets sick and dies. And Apple has not done like anything interesting basically since Steve Jobs died. What have they done? The watch? The watch is just an iPhone on your wrist. What were the goggles called? I don't even remember what those goggles were called, but literally no one talked about the Apple goggles 1 week after they launched. Apple Vision? Is that what it was? I don't even remember. Those things just vanished into thin air. So anyway, I highly recommend checking out this video. I think it could be helpful to people who go to school for art or are thinking about getting a job in an artistic field as an artist, or I suppose like any creative field. You really have to be conscientious of like what it is that makes you happy with creating, what it is that makes you unhappy with creating. These things are really, really, really important because it could drive you crazy. It could absolutely drive you crazy. And nobody wants to go crazy. So, all right, that's it for me. Have a wonderful week. Maybe Matt will be back next week. I don't know. We'll see. If not, then maybe you'll just have to suffer another Kevin rant next week. But until then, thanks to all of our patrons for supporting The Create Unknown. You can become a patron at patreon.com/thecreateunknown. Until next time, we will see you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week. And the recent support has been amazing. Sidpoke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezer Good, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and the Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. And thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica, Fairy Kun, Jen Maffasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahim, Natsu, Penny Piddler, Ryan Steer, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Videover. And a tremendous shout-out to our elite baby gang commanders. Atrocious Scuff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight Vinthos, Yeetus Delitus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, and of course, Trev Stead. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer, editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yosua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it, and thanks to Main Gear for powering all our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.